Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Becky Robinson, and I'm so thrilled that you decided to join us for today's webinar with Dr. Kim Cameron. We will be getting started in just a few moments. So as you're coming into the room, I hope you'll take a moment to find the chat panel. The chat will be the place that we can communicate with you throughout today's webinar, and we will be taking your questions live toward the end of today's broadcast. We'd welcome you to engage with us in the chat throughout. And I would love it if you would take a quick moment right now to say hello to us in the chat. We just noticed before the call began that Zoom has had several technology updates. And so if you have the current version, you're going to see that you need to select everyone to ensure that everyone can see your comments. So hi, James. Hi, Mert. And so if you could just change your chat setting to everyone, then everyone should be able to see you. If by chance you have an older version of Zoom, it might say all panelists and attendees. So welcome to Monica in San Francisco. Welcome to George. Welcome in Omaha, Sweden, Vermont, Florida. These are moving so fast. It seems, Kim, that you have a lot of friends on the call because several people are saying that they're really glad to see you again. So we're thrilled that many of you are joining us to celebrate the launch of Dr. Kim Cameron's latest book. And Kim, are you going to show us the book?
I shall show you the book.
Positively Energizing Leadership. And today happens to be the publication date of the book. It's the book's birthday. And so we are thrilled that you are joining us to celebrate, and we're going to have so much amazing learning together today. I'm seeing an international audience. I just saw India. These are all moving so fast, but I'm glad that you're taking the moment to engage with us today. I love that so many of you have joined from around the world. I see Greece, I see Sweden. James mentioned that Amazon tells him that the book will arrive on Friday. Ireland, London. It looks like these international folks like that I'm shouting them out, but I'm also seeing nearly every country. I mean, every state. Not every country, every state. We've got Virginia. Thanks, Connor. We recognize that many of you attend these webinars as a part of your professional development. And so if you happen to take a moment to share your organization, this is moving too fast for me today to call out, but Dubai and Malaysia and South Africa. I'm just going to tell you. So isn't that exciting, Kim, that people all around the world care about this topic of positively energizing leadership?
It's fantastic. I mean, I'm delighted. I'm also excited to be able to talk to so many folks.
So a few technical considerations before we dive into today's content. One is that you may have noticed that we are recording today's event. And one of the reasons we record our events is so that you can share them with any colleagues or friends who might benefit from this message. I told Dr. Cameron as we were preparing that this video will be out on the internet forever, and people will have the chance to learn from this amazing content. So we encourage you, please, to share this with others if today's event adds value for you. And based on the fact that I've talked to Kim about the content, I know that it will. If you choose to live tweet today's event, you can use the hashtag positively energizing leadership, and we would love to see your comments throughout the event. So before we dive in too deeply, I do want to give a chance for those who may not have been exposed to Dr. Kim Cameron's work, the chance to hear his more formal bio. Kim is the William Russell Kelly Professor of Management and Organizations in the Ross School of Business, as well as a Professor of Higher Education in the School of Education at the University of Michigan. So if you are a Wolverine and a fan, you can type "Go Blue" into the chat. Dr. Cameron also currently consults with a variety of business, government, educational organizations in North America, South America, Asia, Africa, and Europe. And perhaps the most amazing accomplishment of all is that Kim is the father of 7 children. I'm going to ignore the Ohio State fans in the chat. I'm going to pour some love on those Go Blue fans. Thank you, Jane Dutton. I love seeing all of that. So as we dive in today, Kim, one of the things I want to acknowledge is that this idea of leading with positive energy does have some skeptics. And so one of the things we want to do as we start today is to address those skeptics directly and to talk about some of those objections and why people have them.
So it's an important question, Becky. Practically speaking, it's not unusual for me to encounter executives, attorneys, engineers, scientists who say something like this. They will say, look, Cameron, this is okay as an entertainment side trip, but I have responsibility in my organization. I've got customer satisfaction goals. I've got profitability targets. I have sales objectives. Well-being of my employees matters a lot. If you could show me how this actually pays off, I might pay attention. Otherwise, look, I don't have time for all this soupy, syrupy, saccharine sweet positivity fluff. Well, as it turns out, one of the reasons for writing this book is to provide the evidence, the empirical data that confirms that positive practices, positively energizing leadership in particular, has major impact on bottom line performance. I mean, profitability, productivity, quality, innovation, and so on go up. Customer satisfaction goes up markedly, and in some cases, times 4, times 5 industry average. So that's one objection that we try to address in the book. Another is more broadly focused on just the word positive. A lot of people say, look, this is European, this is North American, this is just happy, clappy Americans speaking. So it's got a cultural bias. Or you're just trying to show us that the rest of the world is negative and only you are positive. So there's a values bias, and it's a little bit, narrow-minded. Turns out, I just finished attending the International Positive Psychology Association meetings, people all over the world. And boy, it is anything but biased toward North America. I mean, I don't know for sure the numbers, but there was a substantial number of folks from China, Asia, Japan, Thailand, Philippines, and so on, studying pretty difficult issues. So the whole point of this focus on positive, and especially positive leadership, positively energizing leadership, is to identify the fact that there's substance. It's not just consultant speak. It's just not airport bookstore advice. There's real validity to taking seriously in organizations and for leaders to take seriously positive practices, and especially to pay attention to the energy that relates to positively energizing leadership.
Thank you so much for covering those objections. We do want to take a moment to check in with our attendees today to see if you have possibly had any of these objections about this idea of positively energizing leadership. So I'm going to launch a poll. We would love to have your feedback on this poll. Have you had any of these objections? This is just consultant speak, and there's no empirical evidence that positively energizing leadership has any business results. Potentially, you've said, these are white middle-class values that you're forcing on me, that ideas are too simple, narrow, or superficial. This is manipulative. Kim, you're being positive because you want to produce better results in your organization. You don't really care, or it sounds like snake oil, or potentially you're going to say, no objections, I'm on board. So we'll give a few moments for our attendees to answer. Kim, do you have any thoughts about what we might see on this poll today?
It may be that we have a biased audience, hard to tell, but that is, if they're skeptical, they may not have signed up. On the other hand, it's important, in fact, to address these issues because, from my perspective, it matters a lot. Performance is affected a lot. And if it's dismissed out of hand, people just say, don't even bother me with this. They're missing a real opportunity.
Sure. I see a comment from Leah, and she's mentioning that she's heard from leaders that we focus too much on culture and not enough on the business. So let's take a look at these poll results, and big thanks to those who have taken the time to answer. Jay says, energy begets energy. And Scott says, my experience is that executives above me are the ones with these objections or have these objections. So let's take a look at these results. I see 73% of people on today's call are on board with the topic of positively energizing leadership. And we have a few objections. The one that's most often cited is that this is consultant speak. So thanks to those of you who have openly and honestly shared your objections. It would be my hope that throughout the event that you'll learn a bit more about the evidence for the results that can come. Let's address this question, Kim, that positively energizing leadership is happyology or feel-good leadership. It is not those things. So can you explain what you mean when you say that positively energizing leadership is not just feel-good speak, feel-good
Sure.
leadership?
Thank you, Becky. So one of the things that has convinced me of positively energizing leadership is the effects that I've seen in organizations. Now, there are effects in organizations. One study, we have 90 organizations. We simply measured the positive energy of those organizations. As it turns out, when they received high scores, that is when leaders were positively energizing in their organizations or rated that way by their employees, there were substantially higher levels of performance than in other organizations. In fact, maybe the most compelling data was studies of 40 organizations that were all in financial services. Now, in financial services, you have one goal, that is show me the money. I mean, I don't care about productivity. I mean, I frankly don't care about how you manage people. I just need a return financially. If I got $100 million invested in that stock portfolio, I need to know how it's doing 15 minutes from now. Well, as it turns out, we intervened in these 40 organizations. Some got a lot better. Some their scores went up in terms of positive energy, positive leadership, positive practices. Some stayed the same, some went down. Over a 2-year period of time, we could then identify, well, what's causal? That is, do things really move? Does the outcome change? 2 years later, we could account for almost 50% of financial performance. Now, do you know anything that predicts Wall Street performance by half? I mean, enormous impact on financial performance. And it was not only financial performance, but employee well-being, innovation, turnover, and so on. Another factor, by the way, that emerged from one of these studies was that family well-being was significantly affected by the positive energy of the boss at work. I mean, we call it extra role impact. So as it turns out, people's lives get affected by the extent to which they're uplifted, elevated, supported, renewed by their boss or by the people with whom they work, not necessarily only their boss, but by people with whom they work, compared to diminished, I'm feeling like I'm just suck the energy or suck the life right out of me.
Well, and what I'm hearing, Kim, is that this isn't just subjective evidence of, someone told you, like I'm getting it echoes. So this isn't just someone who told you, Kim, that, my boss comes home my husband comes home in a better mood when he has a good boss. This is data.
Yeah, it is data, and the data often matters. We did a study of 30 hospitals. Again, over a 2-year period of time, intervened in healthcare organizations. Some got better, some didn't, in terms of positively energizing leadership and positive practices. After 2 years, on something like 9 different dimensions, all of which hospitals care about: patient quality, quality of service, the extent to which people are willing to recommend the hospital, recovery rates, and so on. On some of those dimensions, 8 to 10 times higher than the industry average in terms of outcomes. I mean, they were dramatically better. Well, lives get saved. People get healed. People are better off when they get exposed to these kinds of factors. So it's not just one more motivational speech. It's empirical data. And again, that's the entire motive. I feel like the data has not been shared yet broadly. And that was the entire motive of trying to make it available.
Well, amazing. And it's so powerful to hear. I'm wondering if you could describe the heliotropic effect and give us an example and explain the science behind that. I know this is something that you address in the book.
Thank you. And again, it's one of the major motives for having me write this. And that is every living system, every human being, but every single cell organism is attracted to light or toward positive energy and away from negative energy. So in nature, the sun is a source of positive energy. It's the life-giving force. So every living system is attracted toward light or positive energy, elevates. Well, human beings certainly have that tendency. That is, we are attracted, we flourish in the presence of positive, life-giving energy, and we languish in the presence of negative energy or life-depleting energy. There are all kinds of studies that show that's correct. Now, we kind of know it because we know plants lean toward the light, but that's just one evidence of the phenomena. This research has been done since the 1800s, mostly in physical sciences, biological sciences, but as it turns out, a little bit more now in human beings, human social sciences. And there are a whole bunch of studies that suggest that's true. So I'm going to stop there and simply say the heliotropic effect is simply defined as every living system is attracted toward that which gives life, enhances life, and they languish or they avoid that which detracts from or endangers life. All right, now, lots of studies that confirm that. There are several that are my favorites. One of them is a study done of children ages 3 months to 8 months. Now, these children, this is before even they learn language, certainly before they learn civil behavior. So a child is put on a caregiver's lap, watches a puppet show for maybe 20 or 30 seconds. So a puppet tries to walk across a stage, tries to climb a hill, tries to open a box. Then you have two other puppets. One puppet tries to help, encourage, support. The other puppet tries to hinder, puts a block up, you can't make it up the hill, jumps on the box, you can't open the box. Then 20 or 30 seconds later, you bring these two puppets out, put it in front of the child, and the child can select whichever puppet he or she wants to play with. More than 90% of the time, children select the puppet that tries to help rather than tries to hinder. That is, from the time you're 3 months old, it's inherent. There is an inherent tendency toward virtuousness and away from the reverse. Now, what's that got to do with the heliotropic effect? Human beings are attracted toward virtuousness. And by the way, there are scores of studies with children from 3 months old that suggest that's the case. Well, because there's an inherent tendency toward virtuousness, that, as it turns out, leads to what we refer to as positive energy. The biggest predictor of positively energizing leaders is that they demonstrate virtuous behaviors. Virtuous behaviors means that they express gratitude and kindness and compassion and integrity and forgiveness. And the things that we say, gee, that's the best of the human condition. If everybody was virtuous, if the world was virtuous, there would be no poverty, no war, everybody be well educated. We'd all get along. Mm. So we're trying in many ways to try to diminish the contention, the hostility, the caustic environment we have, the polarization. It's probably worse than I've ever seen in my lifetime, as it turns out. And there are, as it turns out, probably two major approaches to try to handle these issues. I mean, in the book, I talk a little bit about diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is a very important issue. I mean, it dominates most organizations now, at least it's in the top of the list of strategies, and rightly so. So the number one approach in organizations has been what we refer to as a demographic approach. That is, get an example, get a representative from all kinds of different underrepresented or disadvantaged groups, make certain that you have a representative in the senior team or on the team or involved. And we know that heterogeneous groups are more creative and so on. So make sure you have one trans, one female, one African American, one non-born European, one European, one whatever. The second major strategy is training strategy. Need to make certain everybody in our organization has been to implicit bias training. You need to become aware of the superiority that you feel, or the privilege that you have, or the unintended biases that you carry, and so on. Well, there was an interesting study done a couple of years ago, actually. It was called a meta-analysis. We take data from all these studies, analyzing the extent to which those were effective in enhancing diversity, equity, inclusion. The conclusion of the study, 700 plus studies. The conclusion of the study was not only didn't they help, in many cases they harmed. That is, things got worse. Well, if those two major strategies don't help us, what would? Well, my prescription is virtuousness. See, virtuousness simply means I'm interested in helping you flourish. I'm helping you reach your highest potential. I'm interested in expressing gratitude, helping you achieve goals that you didn't think you could achieve, expressing forgiveness, helping you grow from mistakes, and so on. And in that case, if I help everybody flourish, I mean, it doesn't matter the color of your skin or the gender or ethnicity or whatever, it helps us get better. All of us get better. So that's one of the reasons positive energy, positive leadership is so effective in helping, especially in difficult situations.
So I have some questions that came in. I'm going to take us off script for a minute. We had a couple of questions related to really wanting to understand some leaders who apply this work, and then also talking about specific examples of positive energy projection in the workplace. And you started to get there with the reference to diversity, equity, inclusion, and also the reference to virtuousness and those virtuous qualities showing up in the workplace. But can we dive into that a bit more?
Sure, you bet. The sort of, I'm going to make a general statement first. The book makes the case empirically that virtuous behaviors, and there are a long list of those, and we can illustrate those and give you examples of those. Virtuous behaviors lead to, it's the biggest predictor of feeling positively energized. Virtuous behavior leads to positive energy, especially positively energizing leadership. That in turn leads to higher performance in organizations. That's the causal connection that is made in the book with evidence. So now the question is, okay, well, what would we mean by that, and who does it, and what would I look for, and so on? Well, there are lots of examples. Let me tell you one or two small examples, and then I'll go in a little bit more detail in terms of behaviors. I had an opportunity for several years to work with the Prudential Financial Services Organization, big international financial services organization. In one of the businesses within Prudential was called the retirement business. Now that turns out to be the largest business in any financial services organization, because all of us put our money in a retirement fund. So if you're not doing well in retirement, you're in trouble. Well, they were struggling a bit, so they felt like they had to merge, and they decided to merge with a competitor. It'd be like merging the Yankees and Red Sox, Michigan and Ohio State. I mean, are you kidding me? How in the world can we possibly make this work? The CEO of the competitor firm, Cigna Retirement, became the CEO of the merged organization. They simply named it Prudential Retirement. His name is John Kim. John Kim ended up being a graduate of the University of Michigan and learned about positive leadership, positive practices. And he said, I want to have you come and help us change our entire culture. And especially, we want you to help us make this merger successful with our key competitor, our rival. And he said, initially, I thought positive was just soupy, syrupy, smiley face. And he learned, he said, that this is a major intervention. It's a culture change. It's something that I didn't expect would be so profound. Well, after about a 2-year period of time, not only was the merger successful, they went from losses to gains and profitability. There's from poor performance to good performance, lower turnover rates, climate satisfaction scores went up, all kinds of those indicators. But the real test was John then was hired to become the president of the world's largest mutual insurance company. So he left Prudential. That's normally the test. Is this just a fad? Is this going to go away? I mean, does this have any sticking power at all? Turns out they didn't miss a beat. They have continued that trajectory with his successor, who now has also had another successor. But it lasted. It changed the entire culture of the organization. One of the people in his organization, by the way, who helped with the merger, the number 2 guy, was made the CEO of another one of the Prudential businesses, Jim Malazzi. And he said, look, when I took over, we were losing $140 million. The year before, they'd lost $210 million 2 years ago. He said, we implemented positive practices. I tried to develop and exemplify positive leadership. So from $210 million in the red, what happens? 1 year later, they're $20 million in the black. It's a $230 million turnaround in 12 months. They won the J.D. Power Award for service. They went from having to pay some customers to maintain their relationship to now they had in 1 year 100% customer satisfaction rating. You don't get 100% customer satisfaction rating ever, but they achieved it. And 2 times business plan and so on and so on. All right, so those are idiosyncratic, just one-time events. But it piqued my interest saying, boy, if it happens in these major financial services organizations where, there's a lot of pressure to show bottom line results, how about some others? So that started this whole area of research where we started getting big sample sizes and all kinds of different industries, manufacturing, education, not-for-profit, military, and we did a lot of this in the US Army and so on. All right, so it became clear to me that there's something here. We can count for half the variance in financial performance in some of these organizations. There's got to be something to it. Well, so what is the something to it? I think that may be one of the questions. Well, in one study, 600 or 700 executives in this study, we simply interviewed trying to identify the attributes of positive energizers, people who exuded, positively energizing behaviors. And that's where virtuousness emerged, because most of the factors that emerged from these interviews, we interviewed positive energizers, and we interviewed people about that. And, they're not surprising behaviors, not surprising elements that emerge. They help other people flourish without expecting a return. It's what your mother does. They express gratitude, which almost by definition means that they also express humility. If I express gratitude to somebody, that also means that I'm to some extent not trying to be superior to them. They are generous and compassionate and contributing. I mean, most organizations, when you do well, give you a reward. They give you financial incentive, they put a star on your lapel, they put your name in a newsletter. That is, you get stuff. Turns out virtuousness has more emphasis on contribution and generosity than receipt. That's what it means by helping other people flourish without expecting a return. I got to give you a couple of examples of this.
Mm-hmm.
So in one study, there are probably a dozen studies talked about in the book, but one study, they took multiple sclerosis patients, MS patients. Half of these people were assigned to receive a phone call once a week from somebody expressing love, support, and concern. The other half of these people were assigned to place a phone call once a week, expressing love, support, and concern. 2 years later, they measured self-efficacy, physical activity, hope, depression, and so on. I don't remember all the outcomes. 8-fold difference. Those people who placed the phone call were 8 times healthier than those who received the phone call. That is, the contribution they made redounded to their benefit. It was far more important in predicting performance. And that, by the way, has been replicated in many cases. A study done with kidney dialysis patients, for example, they were measured on the extent to which they were being loved, supported, and elevated by somebody versus the extent to which they were making the difference in somebody else's life. The second factor was far more predictive than the first factor in physical recovery. People who have lost spouses, there was a study done of widows who lost a spouse. In 6 months, those who had actively contributed, assisted, helped somebody had expressed no depression, experienced no depression versus the others who had significant depression, and so on. Anyway, the whole point is, one of the best illustrations of that was, I have a friend who's a senior executive in an organization. She has a daughter, 5 or 6, 7 years old, who hated school. Just, I don't want to go to school. I don't want to go to school. She'd hang on to her mother's skirt when she'd drop her off, and she'd cry, and I'm just ripping the heart out of her mother. Just terrible. So she talked to this little girl's teacher, and the teacher said, well, why don't you ask her about the best thing that happened today? So she can think about the best thing that happened to her. Well, the little girl come back back home at the end of the day, and her mother had asked her the question. It sort of worked, but not great. It didn't solve the symptoms. So the mother was wise enough to change the question. The question was, what is the best thing you did for somebody today? Mm. That somehow just caught on. This little girl would come home and say, Mommy, let me tell you what I did for somebody today. The test was they went to Disney World. They went in a restroom, and in the restroom, there was a cleaning lady. Now, look, they're just people in the way. They're just violating your space. I mean, that's the kind of thing that normally people respond to, cleaning ladies in restaurants. This little girl went up to this woman and said, I hope you have a magical day today. This woman started to cry. She said, I have worked here 14 years. Nobody has ever said, I hope you have a magical day today. I mean, this sweet little girl was just trying to find a way to make a contribution. All right, now that's a side trip, but it's an illustration of one of the attributes of virtuous leaders. They're finding ways to make contributions and so on. Now there's a long list, and we won't go through all those, but I hope that gives some sense. Now you can understand why it seems like it's happy, clappy, syrupy, soupy, but it is not. Performance goes up when people experience that kind of environment.
So I see quite a few questions here, Kim, about correlations to other types of studies. So George asked if you've synced your positive practices with Gallup's research and data regarding individual, team, and company focusing on their strengths. And then someone else is wondering how this is connected to emotional intelligence and living out these virtuous behaviors.
Yeah. So there's lots of answers to all of those. The Gallup data, of course, the best Gallup data that gets published at least is such a whole bunch of single item measures. The Q12 are single items, and they're very predictive. They don't get published in the most serious academic publications because of single item measures. But the phenomena we're talking about is very similar. People are willing to give up salary, vacation days, all kinds of things in order to in order to have a profound purpose, in order to feel like they're making a difference, in order to feel valued. And those kinds of outcomes are associated, of course, with virtuous practices. If I express gratitude to you, if I contribute to you, if I help you flourish beyond what you thought you could. I mean, the best coaches, you're exhausted, you can't take another step forward, and they say, take another lap. I didn't think I could do that, but they helped me do that. Those kinds of people, those kinds of leaders elevate us a lot. So the results are similar. The Gallup data stops, however, in not identifying virtuous practices. They're primarily focusing on, the Q12. Are you valued? Do you have a best friend at work? Does your boss make you feel like you can make a contribution, and so on? So I think virtuousness helps foster those. The other data set was, I don't remember what.
Emotional intelligence. How does showing up
Yeah,
with these virtuous behaviors relate
sure.
to whether or not someone has emotional intelligence?
And that it's a good question. And the answer is, I don't know. Because emotional intelligence ends up being, in some ways, a garbage can. What does that mean? That means everything that's not empirical is emotional intelligence. Everything that's not IQ is emotional intelligence. So lots of things have been put in that bucket. And it sort of depends on who you read, what instrument you use to determine what emotional intelligence is and what it isn't. So I'm happy to have people say, well, people who are virtuous have a more emotional intelligence. That's fine. That's actually not the definition of original emotional intelligence. But, you would expect that a virtuous person, a person who, when you get around him or her, you feel elevated, you feel like it's life-giving, you feel more alive. I mean, if we call that an emotional intelligence, that's fine with me.
So,
Virtuousness matters.
so Leroy has an interesting question. They're asking, what is the difference between positive intent and positive technique, and which is more powerful?
Positive intent
Mm-hmm.
versus positive technique.
Mm-hmm.
So intention matters. I mean, I have a person who has been very offended by me. She doesn't like me at all. My intent has not been to be offensive at all. My intent has been to try to display acceptance and love and support. It hasn't been interpreted that way. So intent matters. I mean, if I were intentionally trying to offend, that would be very different than if I'm not. So intention really does matter. On the other hand, I'm not sure what your intent is until I see a behavior. So generally, a behavior is the thing that affects me the most. And then I go back retrospectively to try to understand whether or not intent is positive or negative, helpful or hurtful, and so on. But when we think about how do you foster, enable, create positively energizing leadership, it is not charisma. It is not extroversion, introversion. It is not somehow attractiveness. It's a set of behaviors that anybody can learn or everybody can learn. And so, as it turns out, the behaviors or the attributes, the display of positive leadership is the thing that matters the most. That's the thing we measure, and it's the thing we can prove has impact on bottom line performance. I can't prove intent has that same impact.
Sure. So, Kim, I'm wondering why a leader's energy is so important when we're dealing with, like we are right now, such rapidly changing and unpredictable environments. I know you addressed that in the book.
Yeah, it's a difficult question. The argument I make in the book is, or one of the arguments I make in the book is that unless we can find something that does not change, we cannot manage change. For example, a chaotic environment, things are rapidly changing. things are, moving constantly. In the military, they talk about a VUCA environment. V stands for volatile, U stands for uncertain, C stands for complex, A stands for ambiguous. So that kind of environment. In that kind of environment, we can't measure, we can't adapt to a VUCA environment unless we can find something stable. Let me give you an example. So I'm in an airplane going 500 miles across the sky. Everything is changing. I cannot navigate the plane unless I can find something that does not change, like the ground or the stars. So many, many years ago, John Kennedy Jr., President Kennedy's son, was flying his private plane from New York to Boston. It got cloudy, it got dark. He couldn't find anything that didn't change. Flew his plane into the ocean, killed himself, killed his wife and her sister. He didn't know he was headed toward water. In fact, they found the black box. He was accelerating as he was going down, assuming he was going up. So I can't find something stable. I can't navigate. Kobe Bryant's pilot apparently did the same thing. Entered a cloud bank, couldn't find anything, wasn't flying by instruments, couldn't find anything that didn't change, flew his plane into the side of the mountain. All right, well, what doesn't change? How can we measure VUCA environments when it's chaos? Well, one of the things that doesn't change is virtuousness. Kindness was the same 1,000 years ago as it is today. Helping other people flourish, expressing gratitude, expressing forgiveness, being compassionate. I mean, that hasn't changed ever. Doesn't change with culture, doesn't change with gender, doesn't change with age. I mean, so lots of things do change, but if we can hang on to some things that the human condition from age 3 months on responds positively to virtuousness, we can find what that is, and we have, then we can manage almost any circumstance. Chaotic children out of control, well, we can whack them on the side of the head a lot, or we can have a whole nother approach to helping children behave, and it's more likely to be grounded in virtuous practices than the reverse.
Thank you. That's super helpful. So we do want to give a chance to answer some more of the questions that have been coming into the chat or any new ones. And this one really stands out to me from earlier in the broadcast. Someone asked, why are these positive natural values so challenging in the business corporate sector?
Yeah. It's a good question, and it's an important question because it's true. It's often dismissed. That is, virtuousness, values is often dismissed. The word positive is often dismissed. I mean, there's all kinds of excuses for not using positive. My hypothesis, I don't have data on this, and I could certainly be convinced otherwise. My hypothesis is that over time, there is so much pressure for bottom line performance. And what that normally means in business school, in economics, is a competitive stance. I have to win. I have to get what I am getting. And normally that means you can't get what you want. I've got to come out number one. Second place is the first loser, rather than good, not silver medal, not bad. So we have created competitive environments where winning, making certain that I end up on top, making very certain that I get my needs met, making very certain that my unit gets the reward compared to your unit. So all of those dynamics, we've sort of created a culture that pushes hard on those competitive dynamics, and not always, but frequently antithetical to helping somebody else succeed, helping somebody else flourish. So virtuousness is often dismissed as in a negative way. Forgiveness just means, oh, well, I can excuse that. It really didn't matter after all. It diminished harm. Not true. forgiveness does not mean any of those things. Being compassionate, oh, well, you're just being soft and syrupy and you're not worrying about the real harm done. No, 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 that's not true. Expressing gratitude, that means somehow you're elevating somebody as opposed to, anyway, elevating somebody as opposed to somebody else. Anyway, all of those we can twist and simply say, no, 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 doesn't work. Is so important. And the reason I wanted to make sure this book was written is because the empirical data says otherwise. Performance on individual level and performance on organization level goes up when those behaviors are demonstrated.
Thank you for that. So we do want to give a chance for some of you who are on participating with us today to actually come on the panel and talk face-to-face to Dr. Cameron. If you can find the hand raise function in the bottom of your Zoom panel and use that hand raise function, I will be able to bring over a few of you to talk directly with Kim this afternoon. So if you'd like to raise your hand, I'd be happy to bring you over. We will ask that you're prepared to unmute your microphone so that you can speak. And in the event that you're not able to, then I'm happy to also read out some questions from the chat. So I do see one person with a hand raised here, and I will promote you. In the meantime, there's so many questions that have come into the chat, and I can ask one while these folks are joining us over here on the panel. So, sir, it looks like we have two possible panelists here who have joined to ask a question. Feel free to unmute. I want to let you say your name so that I don't mess it up.
Yeah, good evening, Ananda. Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
I'm Mubarak Ali, sir. How are you?
Terrific. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, sir. Thanks for inspiring and insightful session. Extending my sincere thanks to Becky Robinson, ma'am, for the excellent doing the moderating sessions under the weaving influence teams there. My question, when was the last time you did something for the first time? And I'm very excited to read your book, sir.
Thanks for the opportunity. Much. Where are you? Are you in India?
I'm Indian, sir. I'm Indian.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Thank you for joining. Oh my gosh.
Thanks a lot, sir. Thanks. It's my pleasure to join with you, sir. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you.
I hope my question, no, when was the last time you did something for the first time?
I'm not.
So when is the last time you did something for the first time?
Today at 1 o'clock Eastern time. That is, I've never had a webinar before with Becky about this book, and I've never had a webinar talking about what we're talking about, I guess. So, yeah, and she's been very helpful to me to make it comfortable and easy for me.
It's an interesting answer. Thank you. James,
Thanks for the opportunity. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hello,
James, would you like to speak?
Always, I'm unaccustomed to public speaking, so, and Kim knows that's not true. Good morning, Kim. It's good to see you.
Good to see you, Jim. My gosh, it's been a while.
It has been. It's almost a year, actually. I'm a little surprised that the year's gone by so fast, hiding in my hidey hole without ever talking to people. So it's nice to see people too. Wow.
Yes.
Kim, I just want to come back. You know, there's this circle that goes around. I find it intriguing to me, as you know from my background. I know David Cooperwriter and Richard Boyatzis and Chris Laszlo. So those aspect of flourishing, intentional change through appreciative inquiry, all seems to have at its core this aspect of positive energy and positive leadership. What's the trigger in here? Why are these things happening in that way? This is they're all kind of bubbling up from different directions. And I guess they're bubbling up from your left prefrontal cortex versus your lizard brain kind of a thing, which is something I'm trying to get my arms around when I teach classes as well.
Well, you know, you are around and a part, Jim, of an extraordinary group, the Case Western Reserve. because that
I
group
apologize
was,
for not having my Michigan sweatshirt on today. As an alum like that, I got that change of clothes too. This is what I
Well-
happened to walk the dog in this morning.
well, the appreciative inquiry and resonant leadership and all those kinds of things that occurred among Richard and David and so on in Case Western actually had an impact. It sort of opened up for me when I was the dean at Case Western. It sort of opened up for me a new set of factors. I entered that position having received a research grant to study forgiveness in organizations. That occurred because I was studying downsizing. How do you downsize an organization? And what happens when you downsize, lay off people, retrench, consolidate? The answer to that question over a 10-year period of time of research was most organizations deteriorate in performance. Morale goes down, productivity goes down, volunteerism goes down, and so on. I mean, a whole bunch of negative factors. I wrote about those, called them the dirty dozen, 12 negative factors. However, and that was typical of between 80 and 90% of all organizations. However, that left 10 or 15% of organizations that flourished after downsizing. And the question became, well, how do you explain those that got better versus everybody else? Well, I didn't have data, but I had a significant impression that is reinforced over and over and over again. The impression was those organizations that flourished after downsizing were virtuous. That's where that word came from, virtuous. Well, long story short, I ended up applying for a grant, research grant, and I got a grant to study forgiveness in organizations. And that's normally an individual phenomenon. Do you forgive or do I forgive? But in organizations, you can institutionalize a culture of forgiveness. So I ended up being there in that spot, that administrative spot with that research grant, but I couldn't do research. You can't do research when you're a dean. Came to Michigan, ended up getting involved in that research, which expanded into the notion of virtuousness. Forgiveness by itself doesn't work, but forgiveness along with gratitude and contribution and integrity and kindness and so on does. All of those things fit together. That's why I call it virtuousness. I can't pull one out and say, aha, it's compassion. It's not compassion independent of other factors. So that sort of led me to where I am today. And that's why I identify that word. But boy, the core appreciative inquiry is essentially appreciative, positive questioning, resonant leadership, and so on. It's all got this core of the word positive embedded in it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
As you can tell, we have quite a few folks on and we have only a few
Great.
minutes left. So Deborah, I think you're up next.
Hi. Good afternoon from Ireland, Professor Cameron. We met in Michigan last year, and I'm at the final stages of my PhD looking at culture in the health sector. And I know the 5-1 ratios with negativity and positivity. And I'm just wondering, why is it? I asked the previous question about the natural values of kindness and why they're so challenging in the business sector. Really, I suppose what I'd like to ask you is, why is it that negativity seems to gather more traction than positivity, notwithstanding the ratio that we all know about, and also the fact that how long do you think it's going to be before this what I would call natural positive leadership will actually gather some traction in corporate or in the business sector, considering they're still struggling with things like, culture and, decency in some respects. We haven't moved on from that, aggressive, competitive, environment that we still work in.
Becky, can you help with that question?
Sure. She's wondering about why it's taking so long for corporations to get traction with the idea of positively energizing leadership.
Yeah. It's a good question, and I don't know the answer for sure. I think that like many things, there needs to be more evidence that it actually pays off, that it's not, snake oil, that it's not just some fad that comes and goes. So the empirical evidence is just, I just can't underline enough the fact that I just believe that we have to make the empirical case that this stuff works, because there's lots of writing about being positive and being happy and, just make sure that you have a smile on your face. Fine, nothing wrong with that. But does it actually relate to profit? Things for which people lose their job if they don't perform. And that's where the data for me is so important. So in some ways, it's let's get the word out. So far, I'm not sure most people, I attend a lot of meetings or get invited in organizations. Most of the people have never heard such a thing. That is, they've never seen the data that it actually works. So in some ways, Becky's doing a great job by publicizing all this.
Sure. So before we run out of time, and Ray and Tess, I hope to get to you in just one moment. I do want to let folks know how they can learn more from Dr. Kim Cameron and from this new book, Positively Energizing Leadership. So I'm going to put up the call to action slide so that everyone sees the ways that you can get involved. Then I'm willing to stay over. I know a lot of folks may have to drop at the top of the hour. Ray and Tess, if you want to stay and ask your questions, I'm going to volunteer on behalf of Dr. Cameron that we'll stay over a few minutes with anyone who wants to stay. Since I brought them over, we'll let them ask their questions. We'll try to end by 10 minutes after. So you can buy Positively Energizing Leadership now on Amazon and other online retailers. If you have by chance already read the book and love the book, we would greatly appreciate your Amazon review, which does help us reach additional readers with this content. And what I'm hearing you say, Kim, is that the way to see this idea to get more traction in organizations is to spread the message to more people, to show them the data. The data's in the book. People need to get the book. So if you're interested in discount book buy for your colleagues, teams, clients, or customers, you can email Dr. Cameron. We're going to put his email address in the chat. And you can also learn more about the Center for Positive Organizations that Dr. Cameron represents by visiting this URL, positiveorgs.bus.umich.edu. We'll put that link in the chat, and we'll also have a follow-up email that will contain our recording and all the resources from today's event. So thank you for those of you who have been with us. And I would like to let, I think, Ray, if you want to ask your question next. And your friend Walter, Dr. Cameron is saying aloha and congratulations on the book, and it's great to see you. Walter, I'll just bring you over. We can't let you speak, but since you have such warm wishes, it seems like maybe Kim would like to see your face. Ray, would you like to ask your question next?
Well, I have to tell you that Walter is one of the researchers who's uncovered a lot of these wonderful findings. He's in the military and he's saving our lives, and a spectacular human being. And look at that hat. Holy cow, fantastic.
Go blue. That was worth bringing you over. I'm sorry about that, Walter.
Go blue, Cam. I just wanted to say aloha from Hawaii. It's great to see you. Kim was on my dissertation committee and a huge mentor for me during my PhD program. And I just want to say it's great to see him. Thank you so much. Mahalo. All the best.
Thank you. Mahalo to you, Walter. Thank you. Walter's a wonderful scholar, as is Ray Robinson, who was also at the University of Michigan and who is running a worldwide organization at the present time. Spectacular leader himself.
Well, I'm pretty grateful to be here and grateful for your leadership and influence in my life. My question is, many of us sit in organizations and don't have the opportunity to design them ourselves. What counsel would you give us for designing from within, from below?
You know, I think there are a lot of factors, but here's one, Ray, and you probably know all this. One of the things that I have found very effective is in an organization to measure who the positive energizers are. You can do that in a number of ways. One of them is to simply have everybody in a senior team rate everybody else in a senior team on a Likert scale, 1 to 7. When I interact with this person, what happens to my energy? When I interact with Ray Robinson, what happens to my energy? Is he uplifting, elevating, life-giving, or is he depleting, exhausting, sucks the life out of me? So I can find out, and that's one of the ways. Another way is to simply say in my organization, name the 3 most energizing people in the organization. Anyway, so I find a way to get those energizers, put them on a team, put them in a room together, share some of the data and help them understand maybe some of the techniques and tools and practices, and then turn them loose. Give them the charge that your job is to be the carriers of this new culture, this positive practice, a new way to think about things. And I call it a 90 in 90 challenge. 90% of the organization has to be infected is the right word, by positive leadership in 90 days. Infect means you can teach it yourself, you know well enough to illustrate it, explain it, and you've attempted a 1% improvement yourself. That's what infect means. And as it turns out, that's one, but it turns out to be a very effective intervention to start a culture change. That is, mobilize positive energizers. It's a great question, Ray. And I had to ask you the question because you've done this a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ray. Tess.
Hello. Hi, Kim. Hi, I'm Tess, and I'm calling in from London, England.
Fantastic.
And hi, I love your work. Totally love it. And I just love it. And I know that it works. My question is really about the pandemic and post-pandemic and energizing. And this is the loss and grief, sudden loss and sudden grief, which has resulted from the pandemic in some respects, but also not from the pandemic, but during the pandemic. And it's that kind of energy that can be got, your thoughts from that suffering, from that grief, from that loss in this time as we move towards a better, more stable place. I welcome your thoughts. I personally, I lost my brother during this time, who was killed suddenly. And he was killed suddenly by a hit and run driver. And this just brings everything to life.
Wow, I am certainly express my condolences, Tess, to you on the loss of your brother. Those are the life-changing events. You just can't diminish their importance in our lives. And I don't have any. I wish I had the really pithy statements that I could make that really, affect your life. Mahatma Gandhi and Winston Churchill and such people. It would be nice if I had some of those. I don't. But I'm just more and more convinced, especially in difficult times, trial. I mean, I think about the losses, especially the loss of life in families, in our family and friends and so on. And among other things, expressing sympathy, of course. But those are the times in my life when virtuousness, having somebody behave that way, represent a virtuous perspective. Those are the most elevating. They're the most consoling. They're the best impact and influence for me. Compared to what we started out with, competitive selfishness. I want to get mine. I'm going to be winner. I'm going to make sure I'm popular. Everybody needs to know me. I mean, who cares when fundamental human conditions impose on us? So, it's easy to see that you're one of those people that just represents inherent goodness. The Greeks called it eudaimonism. Anyway, whatever that word is pronounced. The idea is goodness for its own sake. So just being good for its own sake, is the best of the human condition.
I love it. I love it. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for that. I'm going to go off script again. Kim, I'm going to kick it back to you for just any closing statement that you might have about positively energizing leadership and why it's so important to you. After that, I'm going to stop the recording. And if there are any friends and fans of Kim's who want to come over and say congratulations, when I stop the recording, it's an exciting day with the launch of your new book into the world. And it seems like you're a very popular guy. So if there's anybody else, you can use that hand raise function. Otherwise, we'll end the webinar. But Kim, if you could send us out with some, closing thoughts.
Well, thank you, Becky, for the chance to do this. I have, in the books I've written, I've never hired a publicist. And I was just encouraged to do that by the publisher of this book. And Weaving Influence turns out to be this extraordinary organization, extraordinary company. I mean, Becky herself is writing a book on how to write a book and make it have impact. I mean, she's the expert. And so it's just a delight, really, to do something I've never done before, and that is to work closely with this wonderful company, Weaving Influence, who's set up this webinar and who's connecting the messages of this book with other kinds of outlets that I would never have thought of, not even aware of. So I'm just grateful, Becky, to you and this extraordinary team. I mean, there's a team of folks who are just incredible. I'll get an email at 11:30 at night saying, oh, by the way. So, I mean, this is a team that's going 24 hours a day, and it's very helpful. So thank you very much.
Thank you.